webinar are very much interested to understand how they can be accredited and how they can effectively participate and engage the ECOSOC more. So we hope in the near future we'll be organizing more engagements with civil society to let them know how they can participate more. With that said, thank you for your opening remarks. Now we're going to the gist of today's business, which is an understanding of the history of the APRM, some of its key successes, its challenges, and what we hope to see as we move forward into the future. And there's no one really from the Continental Secretariat that can explain this better than Mr. Dauma Jama, who's the technical advisor to the Organization for Governance Reviews and Assessments. To me, he is a fountain of knowledge. Since I joined the APRM, he's always been almost like institutional memory. So we hope he can take us through almost the history of the APRM, some of the key challenges, the successes, and where we hope to go in the next few years. With that said, Mr. Dauma, please feel free to switch on your camera, interact with participants. You have 15 minutes to briefly give us an overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, very good. I will start the presentation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the APRM mandate, some of our successes and challenges over the last 20 years. It's quite a broad topic for 15 minutes. So I've tried to concentrate on some of the areas where maybe we can explain where we have overcome challenges and some of our past achievements, as well as where we are now currently. So it's going to be a bit of a mishmash. So I hope that maybe if there's a Q&A, we can go into more details that might interest some of the participants. So thank you very much, moderator. It really is a delight to be here with you. So as I said, I'll go a little bit because I'm sure there are some present here who might not be as aware of who we are as the APRM and how we contribute to our union and indeed to our continent. So I will go a little bit, but over that, it'll be my first maybe half a dozen slides, but it will be a quick journey. And I'll try to highlight what we add, what is our value addition to the African Union. And then the middle part of my presentation will concentrate on some of the challenges where we overcame, especially with our first strategic plan from 2016 to 2020 on revitalization, as well as where we are now with the current strategic plan, which is basically I would say, a continuation of the first strategic plan with concentration on what we say is consolidation of those achievements in the first strategic plan. And then I will end it with talking about our current challenges, not the challenges of the past, but where we are now and prospects, because challenges and prospects are very much, they are twins. So some of our challenges can indeed form a basis for our future opportunities. So dear participants, APRM was launched in 2003, the 9th of March. So we'll be in 2 days, we will be marking our 20th anniversary. And it was launched by a set of heads of state who had from NEPAD. And the reason behind this was that NEPAD was and is our infrastructure, our champion for large-scale projects across the continent, whether power, whether water. But at the same time, when the NEPAD heads of state met, they agreed that in order to be able to work together, we had to agree on standards and codes and governance. And APRM is sort of like a soft body that allows each of the member states to agree with the entire continent on the basic standards and codes that will in the end form the basis as a foundation for our development. So that is why we were conceived as part of the NEPAD vision. We are African owned and led, and in a nutshell, what we try to do is to work with our member states to look at the status of governance in a number of fields and try to help our member states improve on those areas. So in a way, it's like a mirror. It's not so much where we benchmark and compare member states to each other, although there are some commonly agreed standards that all of us, each of the 55 members, are to reach eventually of the AU. But the fact is, we are trying to compare ourselves to where we were in the past and make sure that we are improving. So that, in a nutshell, is the reason behind why APRM was conceived by the NEPAD heads of state and government. And we look at areas such as democracy, political governance, economic governance, corporate governance, and of course, socioeconomic development in all its registers, including housing, infrastructure, health, etc., sanitation, etc. Within the AU, we primarily address two of Agenda 2063, our long-term plans areas, especially Aspiration 3 on an Africa of good governance, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law, and Aspiration 4. As a result, APRM as an institution contributes to two of our continental infrastructures, architectures. One is the Africa Governance Architecture, which a few years ago we chaired, and secondly, the Africa Peace and Security Architecture. As I mentioned, we look at 5 areas. State resilience was conceived as part of the results of the pandemic, where we found that perhaps we should also be interrogating governance of resilience, our resilience. So we completed the first review that had all 5 thematic areas last year, the one for South Africa, which included state resilience. And now our normative framework, our questionnaire, includes state resilience. So in a nutshell, we have 5 focus areas in our broad reviews that we do: democracy and political governance, economic governance and management, corporate governance, socioeconomic development, and state resilience. And I will talk a little bit more about our targeted reviews, and these have turned out to be very, very popular with our member states, because within them, a member state can say, we'd like to do a targeted review, not on all 5 thematic areas, because that is very heavy and it takes a lot out of a member state to complete a comprehensive review. It's important, we encourage it, but member states can elect to do a particular focused review in a particular area. In fact, it can be a sub-area of an area. For example, we've had targeted reviews on youth unemployment. So that falls broadly within socioeconomic development or economic governance. Youth unemployment is more of a cross-cutting issue, but we did that for Namibia. Zambia did a targeted review on tourism, and also another one on mineral resource development. We've done a number, in fact, we did about 5 targeted reviews on unconstitutional change of governance as part of Africa Governance Report 2023, which we submitted last month. So targeted reviews is another exciting area that we've to reap some very good results as a result. Where are we? I mentioned the 55 AU member states. There is an assembly decision requesting that APRM be acceded to by all AU member states by 2023. It is a tall order. Where are we now? We're at 43 APRM member states that have signed our accession documents. And 43 of them, it includes Comoros, which exceeded last month at the 32nd APR Forum. 26 of those countries have completed first generation, the comprehensive reviews I spoke about in all 5 areas. 5 member states that include Nigeria, Mozambique, South Africa, Kenya, and Uganda have completed the comprehensive reviews twice. That is, they've completed second generation reviews as well. And 5 countries have completed targeted reviews, which, as I mentioned, can be on more than one area. So for example, last year we completed for Kenya a targeted review in 5 areas. I think the presidential agenda, what they called President Uhuru Kenyatta's presidential agenda on 4 areas, as well as salient areas such as unemployment, etc. So Kenya did 5 targeted reviews last year, and it was peer reviewed. So these are, in a nutshell, where we are across the regions and across the types of peer reviews on governance that we do. So now let's talk a little bit about our challenges and our achievements. We have had 2 strategic plans since 2016. Before that, we had 1 annual work plans. But in 2016, we conceived and started our strategic planning, which is multi-year and is aligned with the AU plans, AU Agenda 2063. And then in 2020 to 2024, we had a second set of a second strategic plan. So the strategic plan for 2016-2020 is based on 5 priority areas that were highlighted by our heads of state at a meeting held in Kenya in August 2016. And it included a number of priority areas, 6. Revisiting the philosophy of the APRM, making sure that we were adding value to the union. Ensuring compliance as a second with APRM principles. And what are those principles? They include transparency, objectivity in the reviews. Those are the kind of principles that we adhere to. Resource mobilization. At the time, APRM was a voluntary body of AU member states, and as a result, it had to have its own resource mobilization to fund itself. And that was an area that was highlighted as an important pillar, making sure that we could be funded. The 4th area was integration of the APRM into the AU system, because we were founded as part of the NEPAD system, the NEPAD values. We were separate from the rest of the AU. In the end, NEPAD was integrated into the AU before the APRM was, and the APRM forum thought that we had to find a better way of integrating ourselves into the AU system and making ourselves more relevant. Another area, the 5th area, was making sure that APRM could help monitor the governance aspects of AU Agenda 2063 and what at the time we called post-2015 SDGs. And finally, revising our review methodology. And I talked a little bit about some of the things we've done in this area, making sure that it was able to be implemented in a better way, and maybe giving the APRM member states options for the kind of reviews they would like. So those were the strategic challenges that were identified and were called priority areas for improvement in the first strategic plan. And what we can say is that it was based on that strategic plan. The strategic plan was based on what we call the 3R strategy for restoring APRM, reinvigorating it, and renewing it. We formed the strategic plan around these 3 Rs, and we can say that there were a number of achievements. We were able to integrate the APRM budget into the statutory AU budget. We are no longer having voluntary contributions for our budget. We now have predictability through being part of the AU budget. From 2017 to 2020, that is the implementation phase of that first strategic plan, we completed 10 peer reviews. We were also able to conceive, as I mentioned, the targeted reviews as a new product. We developed an e-questionnaire tool. We hosted the first and 3 annual methodology forum in those years. And we were able to have the AU Assembly basically validate the APRM's hard work in the area of governance through a series of decisions that we call the expanded mandate. It allowed APRM to now contribute to Agenda 2063, as well as the SDGs, which are very much correlated together. And we have done that, and I'll talk about some of our programs in that key area. And I've mentioned that. I think we'll share the slides, moderators, just so that the colleagues will be aware of how our expanded mandate was a validation of the kind of work we were doing. Then followed the consolidation phase for our achievements from 2020 to 2024. We had some challenges, I would say, because at the beginning of this new strategic plan, which was adopted in February 2020, on the eve of the COVID pandemic. So we had some of the challenges in the first year or two of our program is very much related to field visits, field methodologies, where we go right down to the district level, look at governance at the district, the municipal level, even at the village levels, and try to help our member states improve on their governance at the local, district, regional, and the national levels. So we had to reconceive how we do this in a virtual environment for the first 2 years. But the strategic plan 2020-2024 was conceived before this pandemic came and was approved provisionally in February 2020. So we had to quickly be nimble and make sure that it could be implemented. It had 4 strategic areas: governance reviews, which we call our core mandate, our research team, our monitoring and evaluation team, which contribute to the second priority area, making sure that our human capacity is well developed across the board, not only in the center where we are headquartered in South Africa, but across the entire union where we have national secretariats, as well as national governing commissions, governance commissions, or governing councils, as they're sometimes called, across all the regions of our continent. And of course, our 4th one was advocacy and communication, making sure that we tell our story and we move and follow up. Part of this meeting is where you will advocate for us. For example, some of the civil society attendees here might be in member states where we have a national program of action. We would hope that you would take it forward and say, well, where is our national program of action? Has it been implemented? That's the kind of area that we are trying to achieve in KPA 4, Key Priority Area 4, on advocacy and communication, because it's not just telling a story, but it's also following up, making sure that our governors, as we say, are actually doing what they are saying they are doing. These are some of the current APRM programs and projects. It's not exhaustive, but you'll see that we have done we've managed to listen to and implement some of the major pillars that were identified in the 2016 Heads of State Forum, where they said, make sure that we are more nimble and can respond to the needs of our member states. So just as an aside, we can talk about the annual methodology forum, where governance experts from across the union meet and work regularly on the latest trends in governance. Last year, I think we had the colleague from ECOSOC mentioned that we had citizens forums on unconstitutional changes of government. We were able to present using our incorporation of some of that feedback into Africa Governance Report 2023, which was submitted to the AU Assembly last month. These are the kind of areas we've been able to collaborate with other organs as well as with civil society as a whole. We've been able to do voluntary national reviews on SDGs. We've been able to work and collaborate with the African AFCFTA on tracking implementation of the AFCFTA agreement among state parties. We've been able to work on an APRM governance index that allows our member states and national structures to look eventually at the governance indicators for their member states and across the continent and how we are improving. We've been able to hold annual series of governance seminars. We've been able to have an annual youth symposium. It's been championed initially by the former head of state, the late President Deby of Chad, and this year's annual youth symposium was held in Kampala and was championed by His Excellency President Museveni. So those are the kind of areas we've been able to work with, not only within the AEU system as an organ that works on implementation of the first 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063, but with our civil society and our national structures on making sure that APRM is relevant and is making a difference in governance. So this is some of the pictures of this year's annual youth symposium, which was championed by His Excellency President Museveni. So I have mentioned some of the achievements. This is just a highlight of achievements last year, but I think you've already heard the gist of my story, our story, the APRM story over the last 20 years. We are trying to contribute and make sure that governance is at the front and center of African governance, of African politics, in order that we improve the lives of our citizenry. So what are our challenges in conclusion, dear colleagues? We've had an austerity budget as part of the AU organs that has affected some of our programs. We've had to be nimble and quickly convert so many of our work in the virtual environment. The benefits of sharing experience as a result has been a little bit foregone, but we are still continuing to work on synergies with AU organs such as ECOSOC within the AGA platform, with APSA, and implementation of the recommendations, not only from our reviews, but also the continental reviews that we do as part of the AGA platform, AGR 2019, 2021, 2023, and ensuring links between national governance programs, national governance reports, what we call NGR, and the Africa Governance Report programs. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Here we say that Dalma, but Dalma, you've done a very good job in within 15 minutes to summarize APRM, especially for institutions that are interacting with the APRM for the first time. You gave us a very extensive and detailed presentation on the APRM mandate, its success, and some of its challenges. So thank you so much. At this moment, allow me to recognize some of the institutions that are taking part on this webinar. The Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation, South African Institute of International Affairs, the Sahel Institute for Democracy and Governance. There are also a number of individuals that have been in their own right working to improve good governance on the continent that have joined us. Colleagues such as Musa Kondo, Dr. Webster Zambara, Festus Hangula, Susan Wapi from Zambia, Madam Enwe Chingwete. We thank you for joining us and we recognize you. With that said, we also want to hear from some institutions and individuals that have been around when the APRM was launched, that have been part and parcel of the journey of the African peer review mechanism. And here in South Africa, we have the South African Institute of International Affairs that has a very extensive program on the APRM and has done tremendous work in terms of supporting the APRM in achieving its mandate. So with that said, I'm going to request Dr. Stephen Groots, Mr. Stephen Groots, to take the floor and just give us examples in which civil society has previously and is currently supporting the APRM, and ways in which other civil society organizations that are also interested in supporting the APRM can actually emulate. So Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lennon. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. As Lennon said, I'm from the South African Institute of International Affairs, and we have been watching APRM for a long time. I was thinking we're a little bit like those oxpecker birds that sit on the back of a buffalo. We're there for the journey, and we try to help the buffalo get rid of insects on its body. We're not always appreciated and sometimes are flicked away by the buffalo, but we stick there. And we're still here after 20 years. I'm just going to share my presentation and try and go through it quickly. So first of all, okay, let's see. How do I get it to move? Okay, so I work at the South African Institute of International Affairs. We are one of the oldest think tanks in Africa, founded in 1934. An independent, non-governmental think tank on international affairs. We turn 89 this year. We've worked consistently on APRM since 2002. I know we count its anniversary from the 2003, but preparatory work went in before the APRM was launched. And for my sins, I was there at the very beginning, and I've really been looking at this animal, this institution that has grown so much and done so much over the last 20 years. We've done a variety of research work, analysis, training of civil society, and in the last few years, consulting to the Secretariat. In the very early countries, Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, Mauritius, we were one of the first NGOs to go into those countries and tell them about the APRM and the opportunities that it presented for civil society organizations. So those were landmark events way back in the 2000s. We've developed an online toolkit. We've worked on helping to revise the APRM questionnaire. In South Africa's reviews, we were twice appointed as a technical research institute to help the country put the self-assessment together. We did work on bottlenecks to Africa's development with the Secretariat. We've worked on what Dalma was talking about, the expanded mandate. And we've done a lot of analysis of the reports, and of course, also how the media has or has not been interested in the APRM. But what I really want to talk to you today is about some new work that we've been doing in the last 5 years it happens to be Southern African countries, but we've worked with coalitions of civil society organizations in 6 countries so far to help them distill what they think are the biggest governance issues and write a submission about that to feed into their national process. I'll go into a bit of detail on that. The basics of APRM have been covered. I just thought it's interesting to look at the map. The countries in white are the ones that are not yet members. The countries in yellow are the ones that are members but have not yet been reviewed. So some of them are new, like Comoros. Some are not so new, like Angola and Malawi, which joined in 2004 and yet have not been reviewed yet. If they're in orange, they've had 1 review. If they are in red, they've had 2 reviews. And if they've got the cross-hatching, it means they've also done a targeted review. So Kenya leads the pack, having done 2 reviews plus a targeted review. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's useful to look at this visually. I'm not going over the basics of the APRM. Rachel and Dalmar have covered that. So about 8 years ago now, in May, we held a workshop in Gaborone, which at that point, Botswana was not a member. And we tried to see how the APRM could have synergies with the Southern African Development Community, SADC, which is based in Botswana. And the picture has really changed since that map was put into the logo. The dark orange countries were the ones that were members. The light orange were the ones that are not members at that stage. And let's just have a quick picture of what's going on in the region. Well, in Southern Africa, 7 countries have been reviewed at least once. South Africa twice, Lesotho, Mozambique twice, Mauritius, Zambia, Tanzania, and Namibia. That's full reviews. 2, as I mentioned already, are very slow. Malawi and Angola joined nearly 20 years ago, and not much has happened at national level. 5 have joined in the last few years. You could probably add Namibia, which joined in 2018, and it's already been reviewed. I think probably breaking the record for one of the fastest reviews. But Botswana, Zim, Seychelles, DRC, and now Comoros are members. And in our region, there are 2 countries that have not joined, Madagascar and Eswatini. So those are part of the 12 countries that have not universally acceded. What did we learn about those early engagements with civil society organizations in relation to the APRM? One fundamental lesson was that attending a one-off workshop did not guarantee that civil society organizations would be able to meaningfully participate in their national APRM processes. I hope you can still hear me because my power's just gone off, but I am on an inverter. Can you still hear me, Len?
Please go ahead, Stephen.
Great. We found also that civil society was often ignored or maligned or dismissed by their governments, and their issues were not taken into account. From the CSO side, these processes take so long that many of them ran out of funding and ran out of energy and interest because these reports take years to put together and they just couldn't stick with the process. They felt that governance issues that they felt strongly about were not being adequately reflected in self-assessment reports and review reports. The participation of civil society was often tokenistic and window dressing. They would be invited to a meeting once everything was decided. They weren't really listened to. And so early work that we did in countries like Zambia, Tanzania, South Africa, and Lesotho fed into our ideas about this new project that we call the APS, the APRM Popular Sensitization Project. And it's really about capacity building, but not just through a workshop, capacity building through co-creating a submission. So this was a document I was commissioned to do by the Namibian Institute for Public Policy Research when they joined the APRM. And there you can see Professor Maloka smiling and shaking hands with President Gangob. And this, if people are interested, still remains, I think, one of the more useful 10 pages on, or 8 pages on what is the APRM and why is it important. So how does this project work? Well, firstly, we want to support both civil society and official processes in the countries. We always work with an anchor partner who knows the local context, who understands the NGO environment and the political currents. We usually start off with a pre-planning meeting with core partners, but then have quite a big sensitization workshop, sharing experience. And what we do is we take people who've worked on the similar project in the other countries, and we give them a platform to share their experiences. Each country then forms a CSO APRM working group. They select usually about 12, 13, some as low as 10 key governance issues that they want to put into their submission, which are selected and written up. We've also learned along the way that doing a background paper is important. All of those are combined together, and there's a validation workshop. And then that document is disseminated strategically to government stakeholders and, of course, to the APRM Secretariat. Here you can see the covers of the 5 reports that have been produced so far from Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho. We are busy working on a Malawi report at the moment. So what did we learn from Namibia, and why was this important? So firstly, we partnered with the Institute for Public Policy Research in Windhoek. It's a similar organization to SIA. The one lesson for sure was that we needed multiple engagements. We couldn't just do one workshop and expect a report to be produced. So over the course of 2018, I think I traveled to Windhoek 6 times. Unfortunately, only saw the airport and the road to the airport. So I did not get enough time to visit that beautiful country. The situation was that CSOs were quite weak, and they had quite weak connections between themselves. The Namibian non-governmental forum, NANGOF, was in disarray, was barely functional. And so this project was an opportunity to really strengthen civil society. It was an opportunity to learn from peers and focus on key issues, learn about the process early in order to push for an important quality project in Namibia, involve government to build trust, which was very important. There we partnered with the Botswana Council of NGOs, so that was an umbrella movement. Dalmar talked about pivoting and being nimble. Well, as we started the project, COVID hit. I was only managed to make one trip to Gaborone, and we really had to pivot online. And we found that participation was quite low, so we had to make provision to buy data and airtime for our participants. A background paper was done in Botswana, which was very useful. It was really important for the stakeholders there to remain non-partisan, and we produced a short video on that process. In South Africa, we took a totally different route, and we worked with a youth consultancy called Just Sorrow, and the whole project focused on youth participants, not only on things that are considered youth issues like unemployment or education or skills, but on what youth thought about how government was being run, on social services, on health, on education. And we used the fact that we were all online for this one to include over 100 participants from all 9 provinces. The fact that we were doing it virtually meant that we were really able to reach much further than had it all been in person. There was innovative use of WhatsApp groups. We gave a lot of autonomy to these little working groups that were formed to spend their own budget. And we did an even shorter video, recognizing that the shorter the videos are, the better. In Zimbabwe, we partnered with the Savio Institute, and I actually saw Eda Jawa name on the list. I hope she's still here. It was a very successful partnership, but Zimbabwe is a tough governance climate. It's a place where civic space is really closing quickly. The private voluntary organizations bill is almost through Parliament, which is really going to restrict the space and the voice of civil society. And that was a concern even 2 years ago when we did this report. I have to say Zimbabwean NGOs were skeptical of this just being a window dressing exercise, and would their government actually adhere to the principles of APRM? And the jury is still out on that one. And we did we tried to localize, we tried to connect with local communities, and we did a very nice infographic that summarized the whole report that ran in one of the national newspapers on the week of the launch. This was very interesting in Lesotho, where our partner was a new organization called the Governance Institute for Sustainable Development. This was totally demand-driven. The head of that organization knocked on my virtual door and said, "Wow, we've seen what you've done in these other 4 countries. Could you come and do it in Lesotho?" And so we did. Lesotho being interesting because it was a country that did a first review in the early 2000s, but had made no progress towards a second generation review. So that was the focus of the work that we did there. This turned out to be a hybrid in that most of the early interventions were in person, and then were virtual, and then we were able to do in-person events towards the end and the launch of the report. We found that unfamiliarity with Zoom was one of the restricting factors. Also, people preferred to talk in Sesotho, so we had to make accommodation for that. But this was very interesting because the NGOs that were involved in this were directly asked by governments to feed into an ongoing reform process. And I'll also have to say about Botswana that the work that was done on the APRM submission fed directly into discussions that Botswana is having about changing its constitution. Mr. Chairman, I'm almost done. I've rushed through this. What were some of the common issues that came out of these 5 reports that we've done so far? So there was a lot on government and executive dominance and the weakness of parliament and the judiciary, corruption, poverty and inequality, education, healthcare, gender issues, land issues, the environment and national resources, crime and security. They probably appeared in 4 or 5 of these reports where there were common issues. What are the outliers? What are some of the issues that were unique? So in Namibia, youth unemployment was focused on, corporate citizenship, access to information. In Botswana, there was explicit research on human rights, research and development. In South Africa, on youth political participation and institutional planning. In Zimbabwe, a strong emphasis on shrinking civic space. And 2 issues that came up in Lesotho were poor infrastructure and an examination of corporate governance. So this is my second last slide. What have we learned from these programs? Well, one is the real value of peer learning.
That's being rejected, as already said, by 8 and 10. There's been a slight decrease from 85% in 2014 to 82%, but generally speaking, I think rejection is still remaining high. The same, I think, applies to one-party rule. We see that there has been basically very little, if any, movement in the proportion of the citizens on this continent who reject one-party rule. What is perhaps concerning is the paper line there of rejection of military rule, which stood at 77%, 3 and 4 in 2014, but in 2021, 2022, as we speak, that we've seen a 10 percentage point decline in the proportion of citizens, I think, rejecting a military rule. So those of us who are really interested, and especially civil society organizations working in this area of democracy, we really need to pay close attention to what is happening with the rejection of military rule, because support, as you can see here, for military rule is on the increase. In terms of support for elections, I think there have been times when people have been complaining, expressing concerns about the quality of elections. And indeed, I think last week, in Nigeria, following those elections, there were calls that no, the elections should be cancelled and the fresh election should be conducted. I think that still suggests that people still have high hopes in elections. And I think we see this really reflected in the survey data that we're collecting, where over time, across 28 countries, I mean, from this data that we have available, 3 in 4 citizens still express confidence in elections as a means for electing leaders. So even if elections sometimes bring about contentious outcomes, the confidence in the public still remains strong in the elections themselves. But this does not necessarily mean that they are endorsing the quality of the elections, but rather that notwithstanding the electoral challenges, there is still strong public support for elections as a means for electing leaders. We see the same picture when it comes to multi-party competition, that again, just about two-thirds of our citizens on this continent express support for multi-party competition, even if they acknowledge that sometimes political competition can create division and confusion, but notwithstanding that, large majorities, super majorities actually of our citizens still endorse multi-party competition. And I think this really again speaks to some of our political leaders who tell us that, elections are not, multi-party competition is not necessary. What we need are just to elect leaders that stand on independent platform. So while the story on the demand side is quite positive, unfortunately, the picture that we get from the supply side is the opposite. So in terms of looking at the supply of democracy and democratic institutions, we see that one, I think generally speaking, our citizens think that there are problems with the quality of a democracy, and this has been consistent over time. In 2014, actually, it was at 50% of the citizens felt that their countries were full democracies, or maybe democracies with only minor problems. But by 2022, 2023, this number had gone down to 46%. In terms of also satisfaction with how democracy works, again, the numbers are very poor and falling. So the main story from this slide is that I think while citizens want democracy, they are not satisfied with the quality of the democracy as well as how democracy is working in our countries. So we see this deficit of demand. So when we compile, I think the proportion of citizens that tell us they want democracy and they also they reject the three authoritarian alternatives that are looked at, we see that the number has been falling from 49% in 2014 to 42% in 2023. In terms of the supply, which was already on the low side at 37%, the supply of democracy has declined from where it was, the low numbers that were there in 2014 at 37% to 30% in 2023. So we see this kind of discrepancy here, and that we needed to address the demand side, but more importantly, I think the issues of supply side. In terms of democratic norms, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide in the interest of time, but we see the same trend that most citizens consider elections to be less and less good quality, and that the presidents on the continent are increasingly, ignoring parliament and also ignoring law courts. But in terms of impunity, the numbers are low and stable, but seeing no change. And when we look at trust in government and the social institutions, the numbers show that, again, most people have expressed trust in the military and someone elected leaders like traditional leaders. But for most part, elected political leaders on this continent really don't enjoy high levels of trust, including the presidency, and more worryingly for political parties, both ruling and opposition political parties. There are also, again, citizens express concerns about corruption in various political and government institutions, with the police really rated as the most corrupt institution, followed by parliaments as well as tax officials. The least corrupt institutions that our citizens consider are religious leaders, non-governmental organizations, and traditional leaders in that order. These are who people consider as the least corrupt institutions. So in conclusion, can we say that the democracy is in trouble? Well, I think the answer is yes and no. I think yes, to the extent that citizens express concerns, especially about the supply of democracy, and also, we see this declining rejection of military rule. Indeed, when you see in this slide the proportions of citizens that express acceptance of military intervening when elected leaders abuse power, we see 43% of our citizens saying yes, rejecting the military intervention, but 53% saying, oh, of course, yes, they should intervene when the leaders, abuse power. I wanted to end with a few slides just to illustrate that there are certain, worrying signs in countries that we traditionally consider to be some of our strong democracies. In South Africa, for example, support for democracy is on the decline. Satisfaction with democracy is on the decline, and the larger proportions of citizens consider that there's increased corruption, and that they also consider the country to be heading in the wrong direction. And we see a slightly mixed picture for Ghana, where preference for democracy has gone down, but it seems to be recovering. But satisfaction with democracy is also on the decline, but at least citizens see less corruption in the presidency, but huge numbers of Ghanaians telling us that their country is headed in the wrong direction. I realize I've run out of time, but here are some of our contact details in APRM, and we have tons and tons of data that we are quite happy to share and also to present at a country level as well as regional levels. But I thank you, colleagues at ECOSOC, at APRM, for giving us this opportunity to share some of our results on democracy with you. Thank you. Back to you, Liana.
Thank you so much, Mr. for that extensive presentation with data on citizens' perceptions. And I think citizens' perceptions need to be managed seriously and be taken seriously. What citizen view, the voices of African people are extremely important, so that they can be heard, so that they can participate meaningfully. We hosted this webinar as part and parcel of sort of pre-celebrations, to sort of set the scene for some of the conversation that will be ongoing for the next few months as we celebrate APRM at 20. So for those that are on social media, online, we can continue having the conversation using the hashtag APRM at 20. Of course, you can follow at APRM MOG. This is the official Twitter space for the APRM. And we'll continue having more of this conversation, Twitter spaces, webinars such as this. And at this moment, I'm going to request Ms. Liziwe Masilela to take the floor and give us an overview of what is being planned to actually commemorate APRM's 20th anniversary, as well as sort of guide and brief civil society organizations on what they can do to also celebrate and reflect on the APRM process in their own countries. With that said, Ms. Liziwe, please take the floor, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Greeting and thank you, Lennon. With all protocol observed. Thank you for all the colleagues for their input, been valuable, and it's a lot of learning for us. We are taking notes, and my team is also just identifying those colleagues that are here that we think we can have some collaborative activities, as well as those that we think that we can even collaborate with them further to celebrate our 20th anniversary. Without wasting any more time, our colleagues, despite the 20 years of its existence, that is the APRM, a lot must still be achieved in ensuring that the APRM is by and large known by the public in Africa and globally. Moreover, some stakeholders and observers believe that the APRM has not yielded improvements in governments and service delivery to citizens. This perception must be changed because the mechanism has made incredible strides and accomplishments in executing its mandate, and this can be undertaken by communicating all achievements by the APRM, big or small. Although a lot has been achieved in terms of countries that have voluntarily joined and agreed to be subject themselves to peer review scrutiny, more can be done to safeguard the gains made thus far in ensuring ownership, effective implementation of the recommendations emanating from the reviews, and informed participation of African citizens in APRM programs. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in this regard that the APRM will be marking and celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, to be more precise, in 2 days from now, which is a moment that we want to take to pause and to reflect on the mechanism's achievements and challenges, and to continue improving on its implementation and popularization on the road towards universal accession. Marking the 20th anniversary of the APRM is thus a good vantage point for holding a series of events across the continent to celebrate APRM successes, reflect on the challenges, and advocate for its work in improving governance in Africa. This is a watershed moment for the governance architecture in the continent and should be reverenced as such. The main objectives for the commemoration of the APRM 20th anniversary is to raise public awareness and understanding of the APRM as the premier African instrument for the promotion of good governance and highlight its achievements. The 20th anniversary celebrations will also aim to encourage the remaining AU member states who are not yet members of the APRM to join the mechanism, as well as to revive the APRM processes in member states where APRM activities are dormant. The commemorative activities will further aim to engage the African citizens on the state of governance in Africa through the popularization of the Africa Governance Report 2023, while strengthening partnerships between the APRM stakeholders and the APRM itself. The celebration also aimed to highlight one of the key achievements by the APRM, which is the integration of the mechanism into the African Union, and to consolidate all progress made in implementing APRM programs as safeguard for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, it is therefore against this backdrop that the APRM will be hosting a series of meetings in Johannesburg, South Africa, from the 22nd of May to the 27th of May, and these will be in Sandton, South Africa, at the Sandton Convention Center. If you allow me, Program Director, just to take you through the few meetings that will be taking place in Sandton. First of all, we'll have the youth meeting, and this meeting will discuss findings of the AGR 2022, that is the Africa Governance Report, which seeks to look at the undemocratic or the unconstitutional changes of government in Africa, as well as to validate the plans for the fourth upcoming youth symposium and to discuss the roadmap of the APRM youth activities. Another meeting that will take place in South Africa is the APRM Roundtable on Gender Practices. The Roundtable is a platform for the dissemination of APRM Manual on Gender Equality and Best Practices. Another meeting that will take place is the development of the annual Africa Governance Seminar Series, and we call that AGOS. This is the platform to create, this platform is to create a convergence to interrogate a convergence of academics and practitioners to interrogate dominant and orthodox approaches to governance through an examination of practice, trends, and well as actors. We are also going to have the National Governing Council and National Secretariats on the National Governance Report. And the main objective of the meeting is to induct members of the National Governing Council as well as the National Secretariats on the development process of the National Governance Reports. We will also have a joint meeting of the Peace and Security Council as well as the APRM Joint Retreat. And the objective of the meeting is to strengthening the nexus between governance and peace and security on the continent. We will also have the meeting of the Africa Governance Architecture taking place on the margin of what we'll call the APRM 20th Anniversary Retreat. We will also have the Methodology Forum. This is the annual APRM Methodology Forum, and it's a consultative platform which is used as a reference group for review of the APRM approaches and processes and generate recommendations that enhance their credibility, effectiveness, legitimacy, and universality of the mechanism. We'll also have the meeting of the APRM Task Force on Governance Support Program. And this meeting seeks to discuss the outcomes from the Addis Ababa consultations on the establishment of the APRM Governance Support Program. We'll also have a meeting that seeks to deconstruct the APRM Governance Index and processes. And this meeting seeks to present the APRM Governance Index framework and explain in detail the process and principles of computing the index. We will also have the 20th anniversary, which we hope that will be in a form of a colloquium, as well as the launch of the South African second generation country review report and the legacy report of His Excellency Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa. So what I'm thinking is I will share the other activities with Lennon so that he can then in turn share the roadmap that we have on the celebration of the APRM celebrations with the rest of the colleagues that are in this meeting, so that we can then see ways that we can use for collaborations and partnership in the meetings or in the activities that we have planned to celebrate our 20th anniversaries, which we hope that we will celebrate this throughout 2023. Also, we are hoping that maybe some members that are here could also be incentivized to work with us, just like we are doing with USAIA. We have upcoming collaborations that we have with USAIA. We even partnered in approaching some donors for funding in order to have funds to implement the activities that we are planning for the 20th anniversaries. We are also hoping that the members that are here will form part of our database, because we share a lot in our database with our stakeholders, upcoming events, as well as share the work that is done within the APRM context, so that people at least are up to date with the work that we are doing as the APRM as a whole, and not only as the APRM communication. And maybe I can also take this time to ask the colleagues to follow us on Facebook. We are the African Peer Review Mechanism. You'll find us at APRM, and you'll also find us on Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter. And on Twitter, we are APRM.org. Please follow us on Twitter as well. Our hashtag for this year will be APRM@20. I think that is all I can say right now, and I'll take further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Masilela, for that brief overview of some of activities and events that are still coming as we commemorate APRM's 20th anniversary. Colleagues, I know we've been here for almost an hour, 45 minutes. I thank you so much for holding on. I know there is a webinar fatigue, but you still being here shows your interest to participate. We're at the tail end of this webinar. We have two more presentations. Then we have a question and answer, which will be facilitated by my elder brother, Paul from CDD Ghana. At this juncture, I'm going to ask Ms. Inke, PAP from Africa Lab, to give us an overview of what they're doing and how civil society organizations can contribute to this work, the support that they're giving to the APRM, and briefly the Data for Governance Alliance. Who are some of the members of this? How can other civil society organizations contribute to the alliance? With that said, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you to all of the participants for your patience and for your attention today. We are very happy to be here. First, I want to just give I will try to keep my presentation as quick as possible. My primary purpose today is to demonstrate our AGP website. Before I do that, I just want to explain a little bit about us. The African Legal Information Institute is a project of the law faculty at the University of Cape Town. That's where we are based, although we have colleagues all over the continent. Our primary purpose is to provide free and open access to legal resources across the continent. That has been our mission on a national level and now on an AU level. And the AGP website was a core part of the Data for Governance Alliance. It performs the function of providing legal resources that are authoritative, comprehensive, and up to date. And these resources are intended to be used by lawyers, researchers, CSOs, anyone else who is engaging with an AU organ. And we want to make sure that the website is useful for those who it is intended for. And the purpose is to give CSOs and anyone else working in this space the ability to back up their arguments with authoritative law, so that they have not just data to work with, which is of course very important, but also the legal backing to give authority to their work. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can have a look at the website. So this is the AGP website. You can find it at agp.africanly.org. This website was a long time in the making. We began by doing some research into the different AU organs. We then began to reach out to those organs and request that they help us by providing us with access to their authoritative publications. Of course, one of those organs is the APRM. We then had some strategic engagements with CSOs to ask them, what do you need? How can we best present this information that is in a way that's useful to you? And we then began our major task, which was to collect documents, to digitize documents where those were not available in digital format, and to authenticate each document to make sure that it is the authentic version and that it is reliable. All of the documents have been made machine readable so they can be searched, and they have been put together on this website. As you can see, we have 5,348 documents available on the site at the moment. That number is growing constantly and will continue to grow over the next as long as the website exists. We try to keep it up to date at least several times a week. So what kind of things can you find on this website? If you look here under this menu, you will see what we have. We have legal instruments, charters, treaties, and conventions. We have judgments from the regional African courts, such as the African Court or the East African Court of Justice. We have soft law instruments, which speak to policies and recommendations. And we have gazettes from the different regional economic communities. So the most recent documents are on the homepage here. You can scroll down here to just see what the latest few judgments are that have been handed down. The most recent AU documents are in this section. And then the most recent legal instruments and treaties and protocols are all listed here. So if you are, for example, interested in a particular organ, let's say you want to engage with the African Union Commission. Oh, that's not a good example. Let's say you want to engage with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. If you jump straight to this page, you'll see that there are different document natures, document types. You can filter according to the type you want. You can filter according to the year in which you're interested. And then, of course, there is alphabetical filtering available as well. So this would be good for a person who is interested in engaging with this particular body. When you are a user who perhaps are coming from a thematic place, you are looking for information on a particular type of issue. Let's say you're interested in the rights of children. This search box allows you to search across all of these documents, all 5,348 documents using these terms. So when searching for the rights of children, I have returned 382 documents, which is of course a gigantic amount, and no one has the time to read through all of these. But you can filter according to the document type, the regional body, the court. You can even filter according to the different judges who were sitting in on judgments. There are lots of different options for filtering. Let's say you want to know what the biggest overarching statutory instrument is that relates to the rights of children. If you choose Charter, you will see here the top result is the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. And that is because it is the most relevant charter to the words you've searched with. So here is the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. This is the latest version. You can download it in PDF format, or you can simply read it here on the site. You'll also see in particular instances a little pop-up to show you if a provision has been interpreted in another document. So this provision is authoritatively interpreted in this particular comment from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. And you can scroll through the document and look through to find what you are looking for. You'll see also that we have documents available in all types of languages. At the moment, we have documents in English, in French, in Arabic, and in Kiswahili, as well as Portuguese. So this document happens to be available in more than one language. So if you'd like to read the French version, you can simply switch languages, and then you will find the French version. So that is more or less a quick how-to guide for how to use the website. I want to emphasize also that because we know that a lot of users in Africa use the internet on their mobile phones, we have done a lot of work to make this website mobile friendly. So that is all I want to say today. Please visit the website. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more about it, please go to this About Us page. And of course, we invite you to tell us what works for you, what is not working so well. We want to be able to improve it. And if there is something that you're looking for which you cannot find, we are quite happy to search for it for you. So please use the Get in Touch form to engage with us. Thank you very much.
My dear sister, thank you so much for showcasing that one-stop shop for institutions, non-state actors, civil society organizations, researchers, and those that are interested in the legal frameworks of the institutions that work with the African Union. We appreciate it, and we hope civil society organizations will make use of it. With that said, I'm going to request Ms. Rutendo Nazare to also come and invite civil society organizations to some of the work that we're doing at the APRM process. Ms. Nazare, you have 5 minutes to quickly give us a brief. Then my voice will be gone from your screen. Mr. Paul will take over for the much anticipated question and answer. Ms. Nazare, please take the floor. We are waiting for Ms. Rutendo Nazare, standing in for Dr. McBride Galamba. Maybe she'll join us a bit later. With that said, my dear brother Paul, please do take over for the question and answer. You have the floor. Okay, seems like I will have to take over the question and answer. Colleagues, we have heard so many presentations, statements, and etc. And it's time for you to actually have your voice listened to, give your comments. So right at the bottom, you have the option to raise your hand and you address the question to the respective speaker that you'd like to engage, and they will answer your question. If you could make your questions in less than a minute, please, and the presenters, if they can also answer within 2-3 minutes, because we've been here for quite some time and people need to break from this webinar. So with that said, the floor is open for you to raise your hands and engage the speakers, ask how you can contribute to celebrating the celebrations and etc. So I recognize Ms. Gracia Kabesi. I apologize if I am mispronouncing your name. I can take 3 at a go. I'll just ask our IT support to help me upgrade the hands raised to speakers. Mr. Abubakar Siddiq, if you're in the background, if you can just upgrade our participants, please.
Len, can you please just repeat that once more?
Len. Okay.
Please do give some of the speakers the floor to speak, those that have raised their hands.
Sure, thanks.
And I hear Paul in the background. Paul, are you here?
Yes, Lennon. Sorry, my network has been on and off. Just to say that we've had a morning of engagements. For me, we have 3 very important engagements that we've had. 1, information about our revered institutions, the ECOSOC, the APRM, and sometimes touching on the African Union in general. Then 2, we also have experience sharing. From Steve, for instance, is giving experiences of his work on the APRM fronts in other countries and how it's engaged. Then we've also been blessed with tools from that flow barometer, tools from Lost.Africa, and also some information from that APRM. And more importantly, giving us a line of activities that the APRM is going to embark upon as part of the commemoration of its 20th anniversary. So people online, our guests, kindly feel free to touch on any aspects that you think is ambiguous, those who need more light, those who want to ask questions for clarification. This is a platform that we have so many people online, whether it borders on the tools that are presented, the background of APRM, the objective, the aims, and avenues for engagement. We are also told that we can also be part of the APRM non-state actors. How do we get involved in that? Please, the floor is open for people. Just alert us by raising their hands and you'll be called to contribute. If you have any question, clarification, share experience, anything that you have, please, let's see your hand and you are free to contribute. Yes, Rutendo, please go ahead.
Apologies, I was having trouble with the microphone. I've connected another device. I don't know if I can give the presentation and then we can move on to the questions and answers, if that's okay with you.
Lennon?
Yes, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay, right.
Okay, thank you. I hope there's no echo. Good afternoon. I'll be making this presentation on behalf of Dr. Nkalamba. He is the Director of the Governance and Specialized Reporting Directorate of the APRM. So the Governance and Specialized Reporting Directorate works on an initiative, the network of non-state actors, which brings together selected think tanks, private entities, and civil society organizations. And these together focus on governance in Africa. This network aims to engage in the sharing of best practices, organization of continental advocacy campaigns on specific priorities for decision makers' attention and policy adoption. So basically, we're aiming to bring citizen perceptions to our member states to ensure that governance that's affecting them at the socioeconomic level is taken seriously at the national level. So we do this through trying to create attention for policy adoption and raising an awareness on issues such as youth, as well as our APRM recommendations. So we try to increase our visibility and promote the implementation of our recommendations from our several country reviews that we've conducted. In addition to the above, the network also facilitates the strengthening of links in terms of encouraging academia, civil society, industry champions, and decision makers to work in an integrated manner. And this is what we think would be different from our other initiatives at APRM, because mainly we're with member states and civil society is engaged when we are conducting our reviews. But in terms of ensuring that academia and decision makers are working together and learning from new research and new strides in governance on the continent, that is a missing link that will hoping to help facilitate improvement on. So we aim to provide a platform for dialogue between researchers from the network, experts and key stakeholders on the key trends and challenges regarding the implementation of Africa's socioeconomic agenda. We also help to increase influence and the contribution of numerous think tanks that are on the continent, which we believe are making huge strides in African governance. And we hope that these research institutes can help in policy shaping. And we hope that we can allow that their work, their outputs, reaching decision makers, and not only decision makers, but also other African institutions that are focused on good governance. So basically, this will increase the collaboration, and we hope that this will also increase the difference that this can make on the continent. Because as far as think tanks are concerned, we don't have a general African think tank network that is finding out, especially within the APRM thematic areas, what new research is being developed in different areas. So we aim to stimulate discourse through presentations, informal meetings, formal meetings, and these will also be policymakers, and also we'll make sure that we'll have campaigns and newsletters to allow dissemination of this research. Again, we aim to encourage think tanks to produce content on knowledge. For example, in ideas in areas such as intra-continental trade. And we're developing a database of African-grown research institutions, of not only think tanks, but also practitioners. This year, the APRM will hold an annual network of non-state actors, a general assembly, to effect these objectives of the network, and we hope to have a wide array of stakeholders. We're therefore calling for civil society organizations that are currently in this meeting, and generally, if you know of others, to write to the APRM. We've got info email on our website, and also to Lennon, I'm sure that you have his details, if they would like to be part of the network of non-state actors, because we hope to benefit from the wide array of expertise on the continent. We have other programs such as the ACOS, which was mentioned before, but our biocommunications head of division, which aims to enrich governance curricula on the continent. And this feeds into our hopes to increase governance discourse and increase the level of interaction that we have, not only with think tanks, but academia and our governance institution. We also have a new initiative on schools of government. We are generally aiming to ensure that there are no broken linkages and we can benefit from all our expertise on the continent. So we welcome you to write for APRM, to be part of our think tank and civil society organizations that will be part of our network of non-state actors. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dendo. And I think you've also added more information to us, those that we're not privy to or do not know much about. Now the floor is open again. As I said, we are blessed this morning with 3 aspects of the engagement that we've had. Information about what is APRM, what is ECOSOC, and sometimes touching on the AU in general, mandates, the objectives, and how civil society organizations can engage. We've also have experience, especially from Simon, the work that it does on APM processes, production of materials, documentation, engagement with civil society organizations, a lot to be discussed. Then finally, we are blessed with tools, the Afrobarometer data, the Lost of Africa data. All these things are available to us. How do we engage? How do we tap into some of these things? Were there any aspects of the presentations that you need clarification? You also have personal experience on these things that you want to share. The floor is yours. Okay, so I read from the chats. My question on APRM, this is from Osman Abdel in Ghana. He said, most member countries have undertaken only one country review. What are the incentives for putting the country up for review? Or are there any disincentives not undertaking the review? I think Lennon and your group, you can take this up. I repeat the question. His worry is that most countries have never ever had it or have had it just once. Are there any incentives to motivate more countries to have it more than once? Or are there any disincentives for people to go through the review? That's a question from Abdel Rahman from Ghana. Somebody from APRM can take it up.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just checking if Dalma is still online to be able to take that question. I also see there's more hands. I see Patience has her hand up. If Dalma is online, he can take that question. Or any senior APRM official online. Madam Liziwe, you can take that question if possible. Are there incentives for countries to take more than one country review?
Yes.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So thank you, colleagues, for the question. So what we do is we always try as much as possible to ensure that there's the advocacy of the APRM that countries seem to that they have to know about of the work that the APRM is doing. And for those countries that are dormant, as well as to encourage countries that have undergone the APRM process to at least have what we call, it's a follow-up of the implementation of the APRM recommendations through what we call its progress reports, that countries come to the APRM forum and they present those reports. Because I think, as you would appreciate, the APRM respects the sovereignty of countries. And also they respect that countries do not implement the APRM recommendations at the same pace. So what we do is, for those countries that have at least undertaken the APRM process, we go and we encourage those countries to undergo or to implement the recommendations that were in their country review, reports. What the APRM has done is that it has now come up with an innovation which we call targeted reviews. And because of the fact that we have identified that the normal APRM country review missions can be very expensive because they do not take anything less than 3 weeks. So what we do is that we encourage countries, even those that are not members of the APRM, to approach the APRM and ask the APRM to do what we call targeted reviews. What the countries would then do is that they would look at the aspects within the country. It could be economic, it could be democracy, anything that is within the 5 thematic areas of the APRM. And they would then ask the APRM, let's say like what happened in Zambia, where they approached the APRM and they said to us, can we look at their tourism industry and do a targeted review there? We also did a targeted review for the Namibia, and we looked at the youth unemployment. So what the country does is that they approach the APRM, they zoom in into a specific industry, to a specific aspect of the economy that they would want the APRM to zoom in and focus on. So that is what we do. We do encourage the countries to undergo their second review, but more than anything, we also do not want countries, or we do not really encourage countries to undergo their second reviews while the countries have quite a lot of backlog within the implementation of their first review recommendations. I'm not sure whether that answers the question.
No, so you touch it, but still stay online because there's a follow-up question here. He's wondering why there are so much targeted reviews nowadays. Could they also have eclipsing-based reviews? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of this status quo? So that's a follow-up I think you can add to your answer that you just gave. Why are we having more targeted reviews nowadays? Could they be eclipsing-based reviews? What are the advantages and disadvantages of that?
Can they be what? Eclipsing? I didn't get that one.
Eclipsing. I don't know it myself. Probably Lennon will bring his magic to bear with us. He said, why we are seeing a lot more targeted reviews nowadays. Could they be eclipsing-based reviews? I don't get what is eclipsing-based reviews. And what are the advantages and disadvantages of this status quo?
Well, I think the attendees trying to check if our targeted reviews are taking over the generic base reviews, the full country reviews. So if targeted reviews are becoming more popular and more accepted by member states than normal reviews, I think that's what the attendees are asking.
Sure. So, Ms. Leila, I think you can add to your earlier response.
Okay, thank you once again for the question. I think here I am being put I'm being grilled, Lennon, and I really hope that Rachel was here. But I think, as mentioned earlier, targeted reviews are more efficient and they are cost effective. And sometimes countries would, maybe a government would want to target a specific issue, because remember, your normal APRM country review, it looks at all. Now we have 5 thematic areas because we've also, after the COVID pandemic, we have included the resilience of it's a state resilience type of a thematic review. But you would find like,
or the decline in support, not in support for it. Boniface, if you're there, your data suggests that even though the preference to military rule is still above 60%, still comparing the trend analysis is reducing. So what is causing that? From Susan to Boniface. Boniface, are you with us?
Thank you. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So as we saw, I think there's an increasing, I think, concern about the quality of democracy, especially on the supply side. That people are telling us that the quality of the democracy is not good, and that increasingly a lot of our citizens are also telling us that they are dissatisfied with how democracy is failing, and more importantly, I think the negative direction for which most people see their countries. So I think when people see this kind of dissatisfaction with democracy, and when they see it is failing them, of course they will start to look at these authoritarian alternatives. But of course, one thing we see in our data is that the youth in particular are the ones that are increasingly looking at military rule, one party rule, one man rule as an option. And I think in part because a lot of the youth have not had that experience of life under authoritarian rule. The older people who have had that direct experience of authoritarian rule, they will mostly tell us that, look, things are not good under democracy, but certainly it's still better than the conditions under which we were living in during the authoritarian era. But of course, more and more youth now, I mean, a lot of countries now have hit the 25, some getting into the 30-year mark of democratic rule. So we have quite a lot of people who have become adult and citizens that were not there during the authoritarian era, and they might consider authoritarianism as an alternative, largely because they don't have the experience of living under that form of government.
Thank you, Winifred. I think, Susan, you answered. I have patience, but patience before you, let me go to Tom from Tunis. Tom, go ahead. Hello, my colleague from Tunis. Right, I think it's not ready yet. Patience, please come.
Thank you so much, APRM, for organizing this eye-opening webinar, and of course, allow me to commend all the speakers for their comprehensive and informative presentation. My name is Patience Mnyanyembe from Malawi. I'm a member of SADC Parliament under Southern Africa Youth Forum, SAYOF. My questions are going directly to Stephen from SAYA. In your presentation, you did mention that there are two countries who are very slow, and APRM activities are not, happening in those countries. They're quite dormant, and one of them is Malawi. Stephen, I'm looking at time. 2004 is a long time. So I just wanted to learn from you, do you perhaps have reasons, or maybe have established reasons why things are not working in those countries? And if you have, if you can please share with us what are those reasons, and of course, what are the mechanisms that have been put in place to make sure that those countries, especially Malawi, they are revived, and we have active activities of APRM happening in Malawi and of course Angola. And other than that, I wanted to say that I'm quite impressed with how you have been engaging and partnering with newly established organizations in your implementation in various countries. I know how it is for youth organizations who are just new to scoop a partnership with big organizations like yourself. So I just wanted to ask you, do you perhaps have any reasons or any underlying causes for this type of partnership? Because I know how hard it is for youth organizations who are just new to partner with big organizations. And I know that there are other big organizations on this call who does not give, work to newly established organizations. So maybe if you can just share with us, what's your drive? Maybe they can also learn from what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. Can I go ahead and answer that?
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, Patience. Well, it's very interesting. Back in 2003,
please go ahead.
Back in 2003, we won a tender given out by the government of Malawi at that stage under President Bingu, who we won a tender to do a feasibility study of what would happen if Malawi were to join the APRM. And we did a report, still available on the internet. It's called Malawi, the Big Issues. It's about 20 years old now. But before we had even finalized the report, the president was in Maputo at the AU summit, and he signed the country up to APRM. So I think there was very little consultation done. He didn't even know that his own government had commissioned a study. And so right from the beginning, the political will just wasn't there and to take APRM seriously. So there are countries like Malawi, like Angola, like Togo, that have signed on for many, many years. They didn't have a lot of political will to start with. I think whatever was there has dissipated. I think in 20 years, there have been several different governments and different leaders and different political parties. I will say for Malawi, though, there does seem to be a bit of a revival under your new president, who's come in on a reform ticket. And the partners that we're working with in Malawi include our anchor partner is MEGIN, the Malawi Economic Justice Network. And I know that they have been engaging with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is where the APRM is housed. So we're hoping, by the work that we're doing at the moment with them, that it will be a catalyst to get the process going. It's absolutely no doubt that doing our work in Namibia really pushed the Namibian government to get going on this, to do the targeted review on youth unemployment, and in fact, to go through a full review. So I think when civil society gets organized and energized and focused, they can accomplish a lot. So I think there hasn't been money and there hasn't been political will to get the process going. And I think the APRM Secretariat has tried over many, many years to get the process kick-started in Malawi. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing, is to try and break the logjam. In terms of working with new organizations, yeah, it's sometimes, what I can say is that in each country, we try to find a well-respected umbrella organization or well-respected organization that had reach and that could mobilize other civil society organizations. In some countries, we did work with fairly new organizations, such as in Lesotho and Zimbabwe. And they delivered for us, and they delivered for themselves. I think, we have to make the choice. We have to make a decision on, we're going to pay that institution a fee. Can they deliver? Do they have the track record? And unfortunately, it's usually the more established institutions that will get that kind of contract. But, we interviewed in Malawi for a couple of candidates that we thought might be possible. The point I want to really make is, yes, we have the anchor partner, but we also have many, many other partners that anchor partner brings into the process that can get involved in writing some of the report, in editing some of the report, in disseminating, in finalizing and validating. So, Patience, I'd be very happy if you pop me your email in the chat, or you can contact me in another way, and I can give you an idea of what's happening in Malawi, because we're coming towards completing the report and launching it by the middle of the year. So I hope that answers the question.
But Steve, still stand on for Susan. Susan wants to know if civil society organization is adequately participating in the APRM processes at a national level now compared to the pioneer phase of the APRM.
I think there is definitely more awareness of what APRM is. Susan, you and I have been on this road for a very long time. I think at the beginning it was completely new, and there was a lot of skepticism about the APRM, and those early countries did get mobilized. Through our work that we're trying to do and the work that the Secretariat is doing, we really are trying to have an informed, engaged, knowledgeable, interested and dynamic and motivated civil society that will say, government, you've signed up to these things. Why haven't you done it? We have a program of action that has 100 recommendations. Why have we only moved on 3 of them? There's the learning that there's strength in numbers, that people need to work together and work with other organizations, both within country and cross country. So I wouldn't say we're there yet. I would say that there is more awareness of what APRM is now than there was 20 years ago, but the fundamentals remain the same. It's about voice, it's about representation and transparency and fairness and inclusion. And we still have a long way to go. But I think the kind of in-depth work that we're doing now in Southern Africa, in a way, creates soldiers that can go into battle for the APRM ultimately.
Thank you very much, Steve. My last question comes from Achikambu Marshall, who is the coordinator of African Network of Young Researchers. And he wants to find out, and I quote his question, How do we reinvent democracy in Africa that we call a democracy? How do we do that? Any of their panelists can support him. How do we reinvent democracy in Africa that we will call democracy?
I think yourself, Paul, are best suited to answer that question. They're not takers for that question. Paul, yourself, I'm sure you can answer that question. How do we reinvent democracy? Please.
Well, I mean, a lot have been said this morning, and the processes. One thing we need to take note of that democracy is not an event; it's a process, and that's why there's the need for a pause, reassessment, just like peer review, just like taking up so many accountability mechanisms, just like taking the Afrobarometer data to see where are the gaps. Of course, the African citizens are telling us no matter the challenges, despite the fact that Afrobarometer, the governance and democracy, multi-party elections are not giving us the democratic dividend, they still want multi-party democracy. So the question shouldn't be how do we throw it off, throw the problem with the baby in the bath, but how do we fill the gaps? That's the work for you and I, that's the work for the other organs like what APRM doing, for us to take it up and also publicize the outcome of reviews, publicize and engage with policymakers for policy optics. He who is paving the way must not know the back is crooked. It's up to you and I to pin them on. That's my assessment on that. It's a work. Democracy is a process, not an event. On this note, Lennon, if there's not much to be discussed, I want to call on Paul to give us the vote of thanks, then we call it a day. If you agree with me as my co-chair.
Yes, I think we can close off this webinar, which I think has been quite a success. So we can hand over to our senior Paul Karaoke to close off the meeting.
Right, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much, Lennon, and all of us who are able to join us for the platform. Really been very insightful conversations, and I'm sure we've taken great insights and notes that we can be able to build on from here. Mine is to say thank you to everyone who participated, to all our presenters who took time to prepare their slides and be able to engage with us. Thank you very, very much, and we hope to see you in our upcoming event that we're going to co-host, the African Policy Circle, which is a network of think tanks based on the partnering with APRM Secretariat to host one of the webinars on the 17th of March to celebrate what in the last 20 years. We had a bit of a taste of that when Stephen, our colleague Stephen, made a presentation, but he's going to be doing a more deeper conversation to be joined by Professor Eddie Maloka on the platform on that day, and Susan. So please make plans to join us. The flyer will be shared. Stephen will share the flyer with the colleagues on the platform. Please make a plan to join us on the 17th of March from 12 to 1:30 African time. It'll be really great to have you on the platform so that we can be able to engage and celebrate together what the work that APRM has done over the last 20 years. Thanks. Do have yourself a great afternoon, and we're looking forward to see you again on the 17th. Thank you, Lennon.
Thank you. Back to you, Lennon. Back to you.
Colleagues, with that said, I don't have much to add. We thank you all for sticking in with almost 2.5 hours of conversation. Let's continue having the conversation online, #APRM20, and we look forward to seeing you in future online and physical engagements. And we hope in your various regions of the continent. You can also celebrate APRM Day in the next 2 days on the 9th of March. So with that said, Siyabonga, thank you, Danki, bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Recording stopped.
Bye.
Of the African Union. So we conduct reviews in countries.
One of the biggest challenges facing the continent is really good governance, or the absence of it. The objective is to promote good governance at the political level, economic level, corporate good governance, and socio-economic development. Those are the 4 pillars.
That's really the core business of the APRM, conducting reviews of countries and writing reports on those countries, and then working with those countries to implement the reports of their own on the state of governance in their own countries.
And it is so important for Africa to have this kind of tool, because governance is critical to socio-economic development.
We have to ask ourselves the question to say, therefore, we need, in the first instance, a partnership among ourselves as Africans, not only country to country, but also people to people.
Universities constantly advise policy makers. When governments in those countries articulate policy, they don't articulate policy in the vacuum. No, they articulate policy which is evidence-based. So that's what we want to encourage on our continent.
Good governance must be promoted. Good governance must not only look at processes, but also look at deliverables.
Millions of young people in Africa bear the brunt of poverty, unemployment, and other social ills. This platform hopes to propel young people to become drivers of solutions.
We cannot just assume that we can train young leaders to fall into line with our established systems here on the continent and economic models.
And what we're going to do is we're going to create the Africa we want.
Where is Africa located in the 4th Industrial Revolution?
What are the policies in place that allow us to thrive in 4IR?
We are not too young to be relevant.
The youth and the women of this continent are really not just the future of the continent, but our biggest asset right from now.
And we think the best way to reflect more clearly on the Africa we want to see is to do it with young people.
So the youth are you could say, the heartbeat, the majority of our population on the continent. So we cannot really envisage this future Africa, united continent, without factoring in the role and position of our youth in it.
And I believe very strongly that if we harness the power of the youth and women, we can achieve the Africa we all want.
And so as the youth, we must have the courage to stand up and take responsibility and say, here is an issue, let us figure out a way to solve it, because it lies with us.
And I think whether in parliament, whether at the mayor level, at the council level, at the presidency level, at the minister level, young people have to be in every single key position of leadership.
And I think that the APRM provides a unique platform for civil society, business and government to talk about governance issues in ways that are sometimes not possible or not encouraged in countries. And so I think it's a wonderful tool that really can open up the conversation about how the lives of people are made better.
The African peer review system should not be treated as incidental, that you do everything else and when you've done whatever, in your spare time, you say, well, what about the African peer review? I think it has to be integral. It has to be integral to what? To everything that we do every day.
Now, we have made tremendous progress. Now, what do we need to do? We need to do more of the good things that we have done. And we need to make sure that when these good things are done, they are done for a purpose. And what is the purpose? To make Africa a continent that will be regarded as one that is making life better for all its people.